Tonight at 10, D-Day remembered on the 80th anniversary of the Allied landings on the beaches of Normandy. At the very heart of today's commemorations, some of the last surviving D-Day veterans determined to be here to remember those who never went home. A spectacular display at the British Normandy Memorial as the King pays tribute to their bravery and sacrifice.
Our obligation to remember them, what they stood for and what they achieved for us all, can never diminish.
President Biden and Ukraine's President Zelensky attend the international ceremony and draw parallels between the war in Ukraine and the battles that were fought in Normandy. And tonight across the UK, beacons have been lit to remember the sacrifice of so many.
Also tonight, the TV presenter Michael Mosley has gone missing while on holiday in Greece. A search and rescue operation is underway. At least 35 die in an airstrike on a school sheltering Palestinians in Gaza. Israel says it was targeting fighters. Hamas calls it a massacre. And who's in and who's out of England's squad for the Euros?
On BBC London, the cyber attack which affected hospitals in the capital earlier this week could take up to a month to resolve. We hear from NHS London.
Good evening from Normandy, where some of the last remaining veterans have joined world leaders on the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings. More than 40 British veterans, all around 100 years old, were here at the British Normandy Memorial this morning, overlooking one of the beaches where Allied troops first came ashore. The 6th of June 1944 was the day British, American, Canadian and French troops landed on Sword, Juno, Gold, Omaha and Utah beaches in what was the largest ever seaborne invasion, taking the Germans by surprise. Around 150,000 men took part in the D-Day landings by sea and air. Well, events have taken place along this stretch of coast all day, including an international event that saw world leaders gather with veterans to reflect together. Our royal correspondent Daniela Relf has been following the day's commemorations.
Memories fade, the living testimonies dwindle. But at dawn today, on the beaches of Normandy, they remembered. Making their own 80th anniversary Normandy landing, a group of Royal Marines wading ashore as those before them had done in 1944. But these are peaceful waters, thanks to the sacrifices made on D-Day.
This is it. They're on the beach.
Few truly understood the onslaught they'd face. Young men thrust into the brutality of war. 80 years on, those who survived and grew old honoured lost friends.
It is all because of Gummy's quick thinking, his desire to help those around him, that I can stand before you today. I wish I could tell him I have never taken his sacrifice for granted and will always remember him and our friends. So Gummy, thank you, my old friend.
A tribute from the one who made it home. At the British Normandy Memorial, the service of commemoration put the veterans centre stage. Relegated to the back rows, the King and Queen and President Macron. Watching the service was Joe Mines. He landed on the beaches on D-Day. 80 years have passed, but he never returned, until now. The actor Martin Freeman read his words.
So why would I come back? Well, this is the last and only opportunity for me. The last there will ever be. And it's because of the lads. I want to pay my respects to those who didn't make it. May they rest in peace.
Honouring those who fought in the name of his grandfather, the King spoke of remembrance as an obligation.
Let us commit to carrying forward their resounding message of courage and resilience in the pursuit of freedom, tempered by the duty of responsibilities to others, for the benefit of younger generations. Our gratitude is unfailing and our admiration eternal.
And then a final flourish from the Red Arrows as the service ended. The D-Day veterans moved on to a reception. Some needed a bit of prime ministerial assistance. It was a day of cross-party support, as they also spent time with the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer. It was, though, with the King and the Queen, whom they seemed to share the most. It was intimate and emotional, knowing that this small group of D-Day veterans is unlikely to be back here for a major commemoration. Their stories have been told. It is now down to us to make sure they're not forgotten. Daniela Ralph, BBC News, Ver-Sur-Mer in Normandy.
The US President Joe Biden has drawn comparisons between the war in Ukraine and the fight for freedom on the beaches here in Normandy during World War II. He was speaking at an international event attended by world leaders, including Ukraine's President Zelensky. But unlike 10 years ago, at the 70th commemorations, Russia's President Putin was not invited this time. Our Europe editor Katya Adler has been watching as world leaders remember.
The proud anthem of the French resistance, sung in Normandy today by students who could be the great, even great-great-grandchildren of those who fought and died here for freedom. At this international D-Day ceremony, heads of state and government, representatives of Europe's royal families stood shoulder to shoulder, hearts full of gratitude.
Ils avaient tous peur, à n'en pas douter.
They were afraid,
Mais ils savaient qu'ils menaient une
but they
guerre.
knew that they were fighting a just war,
Ils savaient qu'ils pouvaient en mourir.
and that every step they took brought them closer to restoring freedom to the world.
Rapprocher le monde de la liberté.
But a new war in Europe hung heavy over today's commemorations. Russia was crucial in the defeat of Nazi Germany. But while Ukraine's president was invited here,
you're the savior of the people.
Vladimir Putin was not. This is the US military cemetery in Normandy, final resting place for well over 9,400 US soldiers. Earlier today, Joe Biden made it clear why Russia's president wasn't welcome.
To surrender to bullies, to bow down to dictators, is simply unthinkable. Were we to do that, it means we'd be forgetting what happened here in these hallowed beaches.
US veterans were presented by President Macron with the Légion d'honneur, France's highest honour.
Modern-day geopolitics loom really large over these D-Day commemorations, but the world leaders gathered here don't mean any disrespect. Those valiant veterans who have managed to come here to Normandy know all too well the dangers of aggressive nationalism and the politics of hate. The freedom and peace they fought so hard for is fracturing.
Normandy resident Danielle Boucherie was 5 years old on D-Day, her village amongst the first to be liberated in the early hours of the morning.
I went to sleep under German rule and woke up with the Americans.
Danielle's mum made her a star-spangled dress out of US servicemen's parachutes found in a field. She became a symbol in pigtails of their everlasting gratitude.
If it hadn't been for the Americans, what would have become of us?
Since the Second World War, Europe has relied on the US to have its back in terms of security. These brave men helped forge the transatlantic alliance. Their president today said it was stronger than ever. But with US elections round the corner, Europe knows it can't take anything for granted. Katja Adler, BBC News, Normandy.
Meanwhile, in the UK, as well as a service of remembrance at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire, many communities have come together to remember. Duncan Kennedy has been following the UK events 80 years on.
A lament at the end of a day of reflection. A prelude of sound before the vision of fiery symbolism. The cricket pitch in the village of Hound in Hampshire lit up by just one of the 800 beacons across the country set ablaze tonight. This final act of D-Day commemoration laying down flickering light on the faces of those who came to remember. How moving have you found the lighting of the beacon tonight?
It really makes you stop and think about what happened all the years ago.
People sacrificed their life and the war was very hard for loads of people.
The day had begun at the place set aside for Britain's collective acts of wartime contemplation, the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire. Veterans and families came to honour the fallen and pay homage to sacrifice.
At the going down in the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
The long arc of time could not diminish, for some, the emotional grip of D-Day. Tonight, the acts of remembrance moved to Britain's villages and towns, beacons of hope and peace. D-Day 80 years on, an enduring power to conjure memories of loss and images of sacrifice in the pursuit of victory. Duncan Kennedy, BBC News.
Well, I'm joined now by our Europe editor, Katja Adler. I've spoken to many of the veterans who have been here over the past few days. Talk peace, not war, is what several of them have said. And there's words that really resonate with a generation who fought to liberate Europe.
Yeah, they sacrificed so much for that peace, and in order to keep that peace after the end of the Second World War, the Allies set up a new sort of rule-based order. So we saw the birth of the United Nations, of NATO, the transatlantic military alliance to guarantee Europe's safety. The EU was born out of the ashes of the Second World War to try and bring Germany back into the fold. And of course, Sophie, we saw Chancellor Olaf Scholz here at the commemoration, the D-Day commemorations today. But for a rule-based order to work, you have to have people following the rules. And Russia and China don't like them. They say they were designed by the West for the West. So in different ways, they want to rip up those rules. So we heard Joe Biden saying here today that the struggle between freedom and dictatorship is never ending. And it was almost as if he was saying to those veterans here in Normandy today, thank you so much for everything you did. Now it's up to us, the rest of us, to fight, and not just on the battlefield, for the values that we believe in.
Katja Adler, thank you. Well, I'll be back later on in the programme when I'm talking to a 103-year-old woman who was awarded France's highest honour today. But right now, Clive, back to you in the studio.
OK, Sophie, thank you for that. Now, the TV presenter Michael Mosley, best known for popularising the 5-2 diet, has gone missing while on holiday. He'd set off for a walk at lunchtime yesterday on the Greek island of Symi, but failed to return. Joe Inwood has more from Greece.
As news filtered through the Greek island of Symi, locals shared this recent picture of Michael Mosley, appealing for help to find him. Yesterday, the well-known broadcaster disappeared while walking on this idyllic island. It's now the focus of a search and rescue operation. Firefighters, police and volunteers on the ground. A helicopter from Athens from above. Greek police say that Michael Mosley left his wife on St Nicholas Beach, setting off on a walk to the centre of the island. He failed to make it back to where they were staying, and his phone was found. The 67-year-old broadcaster has appeared on popular programmes across TV and radio. He's an advocate for intermittent fasting.
It's not, I think, what happens in the movies.
And is known for immersing himself in the topics he covers.
I just feel quite buzzy at the moment. So I get it. I think I finally get why people smoke.
This was Michael Mosley a couple of months ago, appearing alongside his wife on the BBC's Morning Live programme. It's now more than 24 hours since he vanished. For the family and friends of Michael Mosley, the wait for news must be unbearable.
Now, we're on the neighbouring island of Rhodes, and it's from here that the search and rescue teams have been based for heading to Myrie. Now, we landed about an hour and a half ago, and even at this time in the evening, you could feel the heat. And in fact, as we landed, our phones flashed up an extreme heat warning, and it is expected to get very hot as 48 degrees on the island of Myrie tomorrow. And it's a beautiful but an unforgiving place, and that is going to make it even more difficult for the people trying to search for Michael Mosley, and even more desperate for his family waiting for news.
Indeed. Joe, thank you for that. Joe Winwood there live in Rhodes. Now, the White House is calling on Israel to publicly release the names of the 20 to 30 Hamas fighters it says it was targeting in an airstrike on a United Nations school being used as a shelter in Gaza. The head of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees says it's been an horrific day, with more than 35 people now known to have died. Well, Israel says it was a precision strike aimed at fighters operating from inside the school in the Nuseirat refugee camp. While Israel often releases the names of those it's targeting, it's rare for America to push for such transparency. Lucy Williamson has the latest from Jerusalem.
Torchlight barely reveals the bodies. Who they were, why they were here, can take even longer to expose. Israel says this strike hit a Hamas compound inside a UN shelter. But an Israeli human rights group said if that were true, the harm to civilians could still make it a war crime. A Hamas official said women and children were among the dead. In daylight, survivors mined the rubble for scraps of security. The head of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees said 6,000 people were sheltering here, and that there had been no warning of the strike. Ibrahim's cousin Mohammed was killed.
I was sitting here with my brothers and friends when suddenly there was an explosion. The mattress protected me because I was sitting against the wall. But all the bodies here are dismembered and torn.
Israel said it had targeted a group of 20 to 30 fighters. Tonight, it named 9 it said it had killed.
We stopped a ticking time bomb. Our intelligence indicated that the terrorists were operating from inside these 3 classrooms. 3 classrooms. We delayed our strike twice because we identified civilians in the area.
Israel began a new offensive in central areas of Gaza this week. Medics say more than 100 people there have been killed. The rapid surge in activity, a sign that pressure to end this war isn't working, or a sign that before too long it might. Lucy Williamson, BBC News, Jerusalem.
The Green Party has launched its plans for the NHS, pledging an extra £30 billion a year for the health service in England by 2030. There'll also be £20 billion for social care. They say the money would come from asking the very richest to pay more tax and extending windfall taxes on oil and gas companies.
We all value our NHS, and the Green Party is the only party being honest in this election about the level of funding that's going to be needed, and being honest that we're going to need to ask the richest in society, including the multimillionaires, the billionaires, to pay modestly more in tax in a way that could raise the funding that's needed to protect our NHS.
And for more on today's election news, you can join Kirsty in a little while for Newsnight.
Well, live on Newsnight tonight, what is the Farage effect on the election? And what are the big political parties doing to fight back as they prep for tomorrow's 7-sided debate? Do join us at 10:30 on BBC Two and on the iPlayer.
Now in Myanmar, where the military seized power 3 years ago, there have been frequent accounts of torture and murder. In the latest atrocity, at least 50 people are said to have been killed. And the details denied by military leaders are disturbing. The BBC has also seen evidence of brutal violence against young protesters, specifically in Chin State. And Yogita Limai, along with camera journalist Sanjay Ganguly and producer Akriti Thapa, have gained rare access to the region. Their report does contain distressing descriptions of torture.
A land where a fragile democracy was crushed by a coup. Now, the military junta has been pushed out of parts of Myanmar by an armed resistance. We're driving into the western Chin State to see how the military has tried to suppress a people's uprising. It's accused of burning and bombing tens of thousands of homes. In Haimul village, we saw evidence of it. Fighting here, farmers, students, truck drivers, labourers. This isn't a professional, well-equipped army. It's propelled by the courage of ordinary people in the face of a savage conflict. How does your family feel about you being on a front line?
Sometimes they are so worried about me, but I must do this job for my son, my family, for our people, for our country.
17-year-old Lalnun Pui convinced her parents to let her join the armed movement. In an essay at school, she explained why. Myanmar is broken now. The soldier of Burma are enemy for me because they have no mercy. My future is People's Defence Force. The teenager loved dancing and TikTok. Captured during a military ambush in August 2022, her body was found 2 days later. Tortured, raped, bludgeoned to death. Also killed, her brother, Lal Ruatmoya, just 15, described as a gentle, obedient boy. He had signs of torture on his chest and genitals, his face disfigured. Their family has shown us evidence of the torture.
It's hard to think of what my children went through, but we will not be discouraged by their death. People in the coming generations too need freedom. It is a fight worth sacrificing one's life for. I'm very proud of them.
Thousands who worked for the Burmese state have switched sides. Molly Kiang told us her son, Vanlal Pikthara, a policeman, chose to join the resistance. His wife was pregnant with their child when he was killed. My son was stabbed here and here. He was brutally assaulted, and even his leg was cut off. It's hard to talk about it, said Molly. For all the lives that have been lost, a few miles away, we find a sign of what has been gained. This used to be a base of the Myanmar military up until November 2023. We're a few miles from Myanmar's western border in its Chin State, and the rebel group, the resistance forces that pushed the military out, they're called the Chin National Army. You can see behind me there the flag that's been hoisted that belongs to the Chin National Army. And the nearest Myanmar military base is about 30 to 40 miles from here. So that's how far back the junta's been pushed from here. It took multiple offensives by resistance forces to take this camp, and it won't be easy going forward. I met Het Ni of the Chin National Army. The groups and the tribes that are fighting together right now, traditionally they've had infighting between each other. Are you going to be able to keep it together?
Yes, there are numerous tribes within the Chin people, and we expect there to be disagreements. But we are fighting as one. Our success is because we know every corner of this intimately.
From new front lines every day, more people arrive at shelters. Millions are displaced across the country. Nora's family fled from their home 2 weeks after she was born. Many here have endured decades of military persecution before. This time, what's evident among them is a strong belief they can win. Yogita Lamai, BBC News, Western Myanmar.
The very latest there on Myanmar's brutal civil war. Now, cricket fans in Dallas were treated to a thrilling finish in the T20 World Cup as the USA beat the former champions Pakistan. The tournament is being co-hosted by America as cricket tries to find a new audience there. The scores were tied in this group stage match before Pakistan tried and failed to make 19 in the Super Over. And the England football manager Gareth Southgate has named his 26-man squad for the Euros, which begin in Germany next week, and there's no place for Jack Grealish, Harry Maguire or James Maddison, who are among those being left behind. England take on Iceland tomorrow at Wembley in their final warm-up game.
We need players that are fit and ready to go from the start. So, again, another really difficult call. You know how I feel about Harry Maguire and what he's done for England and what he's done for me as a manager. Of course, Madders and Jack both give us something different as well. So they've been tough calls. They've been calls that we've gone over and over and over as a group of staff. We just feel other players have had stronger seasons, and particularly in the last 6 months or so.
Boeing's Starliner capsule has arrived at the International Space Station, delivering 2 astronauts to the International Space Station. The mission is long delayed and has experienced several technical problems on the way.
Boeing crew flight test and Starliner aboard the International Space Station. Butch and Sunny have made their arrival.
And Elon Musk's SpaceX rocket has completed its 4th test flight. It made it to space and then splashed down in the Indian Ocean, although it was partly burnt as it re-entered the Earth's atmosphere. Now, that's it from us. Let's rejoin Sophie now in Normandy.
Clive, thank you very much. Well, it was a very special moment here today when the French president awarded a British veteran France's highest honour, the Légion d'honneur. He called her one of the heroes of the shadows. Christian Lamb was a wren. She worked in Whitehall. Her job was to map the coastline right here so that Allied troops would know where they were when they came ashore. She's almost 104. And she didn't think that she would make it today. But as she told me this morning, that changed at the very last minute. Christine Lamb, congratulations on your brand new award, the Légion d'honneur. That must have been quite a moment. You were presented it by President Macron.
Well, it's very nice of you to say so. I'm very proud of it. It's a very unusual, unexpected treat. And of course, I don't know Monsieur Macron. I was able to thank him in French, I think. I hope it worked all right.
You weren't expecting to be here today, were you?
Somebody said that I wouldn't come unless they found a helicopter. I never thought for a moment they would. They did.
What was that like? What was it like coming over in a helicopter?
Thrilling, absolutely thrilling.
You are very nearly 104, aren't you? Next month.
Exactly.
And your role during World War II was to map the French coastline, the Normandy coastline.
But they wanted to be able to identify something like the church or any sort of building which was recognizable, because that was what they needed for landing on the right bit of coast. It was a very exciting job, really, as not many people knew where they were going to land. So I was very glad I did.
What does it mean to you to be here today?
Well, it's really very moving because it's such an amazing big memorial. So I had no idea what it was going to be like. And it's so enormous. And all these names down the pillars and all these little statues, really, each representing so many of our own men who died, age 18, 19, 20, 21, all that sort of age when they were so valuable as soldiers and everything else. We have to remember them for always.
The amazing Christian Lamb. Now, let's have a look at the latest weather. Louise Lear joins us now.
Hi there, Sophie. I was so glad the weather was perfect today, and it was perfect for the closing of the evening, as you can see, with the lighting of the beacons across the country. But those clear skies, in actual fact, are going to come at a cost tomorrow morning, because we're going to see single figures, low single figures in rural spots. These temperatures represent towns and city centres. So a chilly start, particularly for June, to our Friday morning, and a wet one in the far northwest as we see the potential for some heavy rain. So at 7 o'clock in the morning, there will be a short, sharp shock of rain as it moves its way steadily south and east. Now, it'll probably clear Scotland and Northern Ireland by late morning and into lunchtime. Now, further south of that, with those clear skies, yes, a chilly start, but some lovely spells of sunshine first thing tomorrow morning. A little bit of fair weather cloud, but as we go through the day, well, that wet weather is going to sink its way steadily south and east. It'll linger across northern England and North Wales. Sunny spells and a few isolated showers, but highs of 19 in the south. A colder feel further north and west, with a real rush of sharp showers once again in the northwest of Scotland. We've been stuck in repeat all week. Don't expect much change as we head into the weekend. Still low pressure centred to the far north. A weak weather front producing some cloud and showery rain across Wales and the Midlands for the start of Saturday. Ahead of it, bright and breezy to the far north and west. Still a cool breeze, still a rash of showers, and still temperatures below par for this time of year. 11 to 14 degrees the high here, 19 in the southeast. And guess what? More of the same as we go into Sunday. That's it. Back to you, Sophie.
Louise, thank you. It is unimaginable what was happening right here 80 years ago tonight as thousands of men fought their way off the beaches. The names of more than 22,000 who did not make it home are here, written on the walls around me. I've been privileged to spend a few days with some of those who did survive, who are still alive. And all I can say is that it has been truly humbling, the last of an extraordinary generation. Good night.
Fire sector, slow march.
Our gratitude is unfailing and our admiration eternal.
At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.